Hello, and welcome to another edition of In Touch Safety, the workplace health and safety webinar training series presented by Encompass Michigan, the statewide network of comprehensive human service providers working together to develop independence and achieve inclusive communities. Our topic today is preventing slips, trips, and falls. My name is Todd Culver, and I'm the president and CEO of Encompass Michigan. This material was prepared under a Consultation Education and Training grant awarded by the Michigan Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or MIOSHA. Encompass Michigan has a long-standing partnership with MIOSHA's SET division, and we very much value our collaboration in developing and presenting resources to connect with employers and employees that promote greater workplace health and safety. The training objectives on preventing slips, trips, and falls include providing a few definitions, a review of some conditions that can cause accidents resulting from slips, trips, and falls, outlining a few effective prevention strategies, and within that, noting some of the things to look out for that are frequently missed in injury prevention efforts associated with slips, trips, and falls. But first, a review of the data. The Department of Labor, or DOL, has indicated that slips, trips, and falls make up the majority of accidents occurring in the general industry. And in fact, they're the second leading cause of workplace deaths. They also incidentally account for approximately 25% of workers' compensation claims. We quite often associate a slip or a trip or even a fall as a nuisance, an embarrassment, one that might perhaps result only in a minor injury or discomfort, when in fact they can result in serious injuries involving significant bodily harm and even fatality, as the statistics indicate. So it's important to treat them with according seriousness and really focus our injury prevention efforts on slips, trips, and falls as a cause. Defining slips, these are a loss of balance that's caused by too little friction between a person's foot or shoe and the walking surface. Some common causes for this, as you may expect, are wet or oily surfaces, spills, or weather hazards, especially in parking lots and sidewalks, or even in entryways when weather is inclement outdoors. At an entryway, it's possible to bring that the slippery conditions that result from weather hazards indoors at the entry or exit. They can also be caused by loose rugs or mats or overly worn flooring. A trip, on the other hand, results when our foot hits an object and we lose balance. Some common causes for this include an obstructed view, a poorly lighted area, clutter or poor housekeeping in the workplace, torn carpeting or curled up floor mats where an uneven surface can cause that trip, cords or cables across a walkway, or uneven walking surfaces. And a fall is defined as a loss of balance that results in a drop to the floor. There are three different types or categories of falls. One is a fall at the same level. This results from a slip or a trip that immediately precedes a drop to the floor. The second is a fall to a lower level, such as a fall from a ladder or steps or stairs. And the third type is when there is a jump to a lower level and an accident results from that jumping off from one level to another, such as a ladder or stairs or a platform. To review the dynamics of a slip and fall, at a very basic level, the center of gravity in our bodies is at the hip level. And when one foot advances, we can lose traction. If that foot lacks friction with the walking surface, it can slide forward, and then the other foot may not provide sufficient stability to maintain our balance. The result of the loss of that balance is a potential fall, which can result to trauma to our buttocks, hips, back, or even our head. And again, sometimes we think of this as a minor or a nuisance injury or claim, or even just an embarrassment, when in fact, very, very serious injuries can result. Some of the causes for slips, trips, and falls include flooring and footwear. Flooring actually accounts for 50% of slip and fall accidents when there's not enough or too much friction between, again, the foot or shoe and the walking surface, such as when there's been a spill. And with regard to footwear, usually this occurs when shoes or boots are not suitable for the working surface, and almost a quarter of all slip and fall accidents result from improper footwear. The remaining 26% occur as a result of fraudulent claims of injury, failure to properly identify hazards, or improper training procedures or implementation. And the source for these statistics is the National Floor Safety Institute. So what do we look for in terms of what can cause a slip, trip, and fall? If the majority of slip and fall accidents are attributed to flooring and footwear, 74%, as we saw from the data, what we need to do in the workplace is to monitor those surfaces, and this is both inside and out of our facilities, to maintain level, clear, and dry walkways. And we should provide guidelines to employees for proper slip-resistant shoes or boots, and maintain some accountability for utilizing those guidelines and making sure that the appropriate footwear is being worn. The other is in hazard identification and training. We need to, as employers, promote and reward recognition of both hazards and their correction. And we also need to provide training and coaching, sometimes at a very basic level, to slow down, to avoid hurrying, and in some instances, when the surface is already slippery, to shorten our stride a little bit to maintain the proper amount of friction to maintain balance. Some of the high-risk areas in many workplaces include areas where there are transitions, such as entry mats, where there's a transition of surface type from, for example, tile to carpet, or really any change in surface material where there's a transition, there's a potential for either a slip or a trip. And outdoors, or even in some working environments indoors, there are curbs, changes in elevation, and any curb that is not well marked to note that change in elevation can be a high-risk area. Stairs can also be an area that contribute to slips, trips, and falls, and some potential causes on stairs include design and construction. This might have to do with the width, the depth, or even the height of steps. Steps may be equipped with poor tread or surface material. The riser dimensions, the height from one step to the next, may vary. And handrails may not be in place, or even if they are present, they may be at an improper height or poorly placed. Having looked at some of the data and some definitions and an overview of causes, what we need to focus on then is the implementation of preventive efforts, including a prevention program. And some of the components of an effective fall prevention program include overall loss prevention and control as part of our workplace safety strategy, establishing and maintaining a culture of good housekeeping as well as preventive maintenance practices, the selection and treatment of flooring surfaces to make sure that slips and trips are avoided, and involvement really at all levels that include employee engagement with a fall prevention program, management responsibility for its implementation and oversight, and really the demonstration of leadership from management on fall and all accident prevention programming. In terms of the loss prevention and control piece, usually there are 3 steps to that element of the program. The first involves identification of risks. There are methods and tools available to employees to be able to not only identify risks, but to bring them to the attention of the appropriate staff member who can assist with their mitigation or elimination. The implementation of abatement procedures once those risks have been identified. In other words, now that we see that there's a problem, what do we do about it to fix it? And how do we train employees accordingly to make sure that that process is ongoing and that the loop is closed on corrective action. And that's the third step of the program, is procedures that can document the closure of that loop, that the work gets completed to make sure that the risk that's been identified has been abated, and that the steps taken to do so have been effective, so that those procedures can be updated as needed to be optimally effective. The next is to identify risks, and inspection is a term that's often used to describe this element of the program. And as employers, we should be inspecting all working areas, particularly those that are reflective of a high frequency of slips, trips, and falls in our accident and injury records. And we might focus on the following areas for that. Certainly parking lots on the exterior where cracks, potholes, and inclement weather such as rain or snow can contribute to this type of accident. Any change in elevation, such as a ramp, entrances and exits can be high-risk areas, especially, again, when there's poor weather occurring outside. Walkways of all kinds, walking surfaces are where the majority of slip and fall accidents occur. Stairways, poor lighting, irregular height that we mentioned in the particular hazards involved with steps. Anytime surfaces become irregular due to deterioration, and this can occur outdoors, as we mentioned, with cracks or potholes, but also occur indoors if a surface is aging or has not been maintained well. And when carpets or mats are not secured properly to the floor, this can also create an issue. The last piece is abatement and training. And training of staff should include, first of all, how to identify hazards. What is the method that we use? What is the tool that we provide to employees to be able to identify the hazards that can cause a slip or a fall? And also procedures about how to fix them when you find them. That can be as simple as granting authority and, in fact, responsibility to fix an issue once it's been detected, but also making sure that employees are aware of the proper communication channels to notify folks who can fix a problem that they don't have the capacity to correct on site and immediately. This one sort of sub-element of this part of abatement and training should also include the availability of warning symbols where hazards are present that can't be fixed. An example of this would be a wet floor sign or other type of tape or mechanism that's used to block off hazardous areas. And training should also include the impact of slips, trips, and falls on employee health, making sure folks are aware of the fact that it can lead to serious injury, and also the fact that it can lead to significant workers' compensation and injury treatment costs to employers, and that impacts everybody on the team. The next is documenting procedures. We should maintain documentation of procedures for both inspection of the workplace and maintenance of walking and working surfaces and all equipment that's involved. This does a number of things. It establishes a standard of care for the culture that we're trying to create as employers, and that's for both the folks who work within that environment as employees and any visitors, or if the business is public facing. It also provides evidence of adhering to best practices in safety and health management, and this can provide strong support for accreditation, for a compliance audit, or in the event that there is a serious injury, protection against litigation. The documentation should include who conducted the inspection, who is responsible for the corrective action, and there should be notation of when that corrective action was completed. Again, the term that we use often is to close the loop on this, to make sure that there's a system in place to identify hazards, that there's a prescribed method for notifying the appropriate personnel to be able to correct those hazards, and there's documentation that they have in fact been fixed. And lastly, maintenance logs and hazard reports, as with all record keeping, should be as quick and easy as possible, and completion of those logs and reports should be mandatory. That's part of creating the culture of accountability that's associated not just with documentation, but with safety overall. Good housekeeping practices also promote prevention. With regard to entrance floor mats, there's benefits and risks to most things, including this feature. Benefits include the fact that mats can trap moisture and debris that can cause slips and falls, and they can reduce maintenance costs by protecting the flooring surface. But the risks can include poor placement, or the wear and tear can actually create a slip, trip, and fall hazard. As a general rule, when mats are in place for protection against slippery surfaces where folks are coming in from inclement weather, is that we should not be able to see footprints of the pedestrian or the employee after stepping off the mat. In other words, the purpose that it's serving is one of absorption and trapping of moisture, and therefore footprints should not be visible when stepping off the mat. And now a few things to look out for that are frequently missed. This is in the format of a top 9, not top 10, but top 9 common mistakes that have been captured by Midwest Employers Casualty Company. The first is not being systematic in our approach to prevention. That includes at all phases of prevention program implementation, the planning, the design, the risk assessment tools that we create and implement and train people on proper use, the corrective action that's taken to mitigate risks that have been identified through the assessment process, and then making sure that that whole process is documented. The second thing to look out for is the wrong type of flooring for the work. Sometimes aesthetics is emphasized over functionality. Sometimes budget constraints lead us toward consideration of a less expensive surface when in fact that could create a greater slip or trip hazard. We need to be aware of the slip resistance features and characteristics of a work surface, particularly if there's the potential for wet spots or spills. And we also need to bear in mind what the expected utilization period will be. The third thing that is frequently overlooked is inadequate cleaning protocols. The products that we use, the equipment that we use, and the process needs to be all line up to achieve the desired effect of an appropriately maintained walking surface. In areas where spills are a potential, the fourth thing to look out for that is frequently missed is ineffective spill or containment response procedures. We need to assess how likely they are to occur, how they'll be detected when they do occur, how they'll be corrected when they are detected, but most importantly, what steps we can take if occurrence is likely to prevent them. The fifth thing is that's frequently missed is improper footwear. And this is lack of consideration for the slip-resistant features and the sole of working the shoes that employees work in. And we also sometimes overlook accountability for mandatory shoes or boots. If it's been determined that that's required to maintain employee safety, then their use is critical to make sure that there is an effective prevention program in place. And employers also need to develop a replacement policy that's consistent with the guidelines in the personal protective equipment standard. Inadequate maintenance is the sixth thing to look out for. The maintenance program should include regular inspections to identify hazards, documentation that they're promptly addressed, and corrective action that was effective. And we need to continuously monitor these maintenance programs and inspection programs to ensure that the actions we're taking in response are working and properly preventing the conditions that can cause a slip or a fall. The seventh thing is ineffective warnings. Sometimes there are unavoidable conditions that create a slip or fall hazard, and warning tools should be available, such as cones, signage, tape, barriers. And we also need to make sure that folks are aware how to properly place these warnings, as well as that there's good lighting in place so that they are easily observable, so that they can fulfill their intended purpose. The eighth thing is when prevention isn't integrated into everyday action. And this is a common mistake in health and safety programming, where preventive efforts are viewed as a separate feature, not part of an individual's work responsibilities. and they become siloed and frankly paid less attention to when that's the case. So prevention efforts should be made accessible, easy to use, and should be included in everyone's acknowledged job responsibilities. And the ninth and last thing to look out for is when follow-up is not thorough, or perhaps when it's neglected altogether. We need to document that corrective action was taken. And in plain language, that means, did we find it? Did we fix it? And did we prove that it worked? In conclusion and summary, the most important thing that we can do to prevent a slip and fall is to maintain traction and the right amount of friction. We do that in a variety of ways, including choosing the right flooring, choosing the right footwear, ingraining good housekeeping and preventive maintenance in our workplace culture, and then maintaining a program of continuous inspection and documentation again, so that when we are elevating awareness of the conditions that can cause these accidents, and we are encouraging and rewarding employees for finding those conditions, fixing them, and documenting them to prove that the steps that we've taken have worked and that we're keeping folks safe and healthy in the workplace. Thank you for joining us today. Stay safe, stay healthy. Compass Michigan remains committed to being a trusted resource for getting you connected with resources that promote workplace safety and staying informed. Thanks again, and be careful out there.